Welcome, lady friends. What's up? It's your girl here, Olivia, international life and business coach. If you're a creative and ambitious woman who wants to have breakthroughs not only in your business, your bank account, but also your brain, then this is the podcast for you, girlfriend. Get ready to rock your online business, master your social media presence, and monetize your passion from your mobile. Woo! It's time to elegantly strap on those lady balls and jump in. Are you ready to start slaying your side hustle? If so, then join me. Let's get started. Welcome back to today's episode. I have two things to say to you. The first one is that this is officially the last podcast episode for Slaying Your Side Hustle, the podcast. This next episode you're going to hear after this specific one is going to be under the new name Becoming a Podcast Queen, which I'm super excited about. So this podcast is currently under construction. It's going through a makeover, and I cannot wait for you to discover what's on the other side. I'm super pumped and excited about it. P.S. I am actually on TikTok now, and I will be doing an episode all around my adventures on TikTok for podcasting. Now, in this particular episode today, the very last episode for Slaying Your Side Hustle, I was interviewed by this amazing woman named Juliana Frisoli. Go listen to her podcast called Becoming Magnetic. She interviewed me all about how to start a podcast, and we had so much fun in this episode. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on this one. So feel free to DM me, share it with people that you love and like, people that you think will actually get a lot of benefit from this, but purely just enjoy it because it was such a fun, awesome episode, and I feel like we really connected. So check her out. She's awesome, and I'll see you guys in the new podcast.
All right. Hey, everyone. I am here with Olivia Powell, and we're going to be talking to you all about podcasts. So this is a podcast about podcasts. I have been getting a lot of questions since I started my podcast about what I'm doing, what is needed to start a podcast, if I'm DIYing or if I have a team, how much editing is involved, all the techie shit, and then also how to market your podcast and how to actually get subscribers, how to get listens, all of the things. So I brought on Olivia Powell to talk to you all about podcasting because she is a bit of a podcast expert herself. She is also a business coach. So she will be talking to you about podcasting, what's needed to start a podcast. I'm going to talk to you guys about some of the techie side, and then she's really going to hit it home with the marketing. So I'm going to let her introduce herself. So Olivia, if you want to just tell the people who you are and what you're about.
Sure. So I am Olivia Powell. I'm 29 years old living in Australia. I'm a business coach, as Juliana said, and I've had my podcast for about 17 months now. And I'm absolutely obsessed with podcasting and anything business and entrepreneurialism, but specifically, starting or running a podcast as a hobby or as an extra leg to your business, or actually starting a podcast as your business and growing it from there.
Cool. So what inspired you to start your podcast journey? Because I don't actually know this.
Ooh, I actually haven't been asked this before. So there's two reasons why there's two stories and how it actually all began. So the first one was I used to be with a network marketing company, and, it wasn't for me long term. So I stopped doing that for a little while. However, I saw one of our top sellers on Instagram with this book about, I think it was like Girl Code or something to do with like female business owning and entrepreneurialism. And it piqued my interest. And this author had a podcast, and I'll just give her a shout out. Her name's Cara Elwill. She might not ever listen to this, but she's just absolutely.
Yeah. I met her in person. At Summit of Slay. Yeah. At Summit of Slay 2019. I met her in person. I got to have champagne with her and Amanda Francis.
Oh my God, stop it.
Yeah, very surreal experience, but
they are like two of my, they're two people, they're two of my idols. So the fact that you've met them is freaking phenomenal. So Cara Elwill was the first one. She was the first podcast I ever listened to, Style Your Mind. And I just fell in love with it because I was at this place in my life where I was kind of I don't like to use the word broken, but definitely beaten down by life circumstances. I had ended a long-term relationship, and I was engaged to a man that was quite narcissistic, which you know about because I've interviewed you on my podcast when it was all about that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was just in a place of feeling really lost. And it was like really the start of my self-development, I guess, and personal development and, awareness and becoming enlightened, I suppose. It was really the start of that whole journey. And by listening to Kara's podcast, I actually discovered life coaching. And that was the first time I ever thought, oh, life coaching. I think I want to be a life coach. And then I just went, when I have an idea, I'm just someone, and when I've made a decision, I just like go hell bent all in on it. Like I literally that day called up, like I Googled the closest life coaching college, called them, decided to go to their welcome day. And then when I was listening to her podcast, I was like, I could do this. And what I really liked about it was not just it's not like the radio where it's just like they talk about anything and everything and it's very like fluffy sometimes and all of that. I really liked how the podcast was very personalized and very specific to something. So she was kind of talking to my soul as a listener. And then so that's kind of what sparked the idea in the first place. And then when it actually came to starting my own podcast, I was like, well, what the hell do I even talk about? Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't really even know where I wanted to start. And then I had to think, okay, what have I been through that I can help others with? And that was actually overcoming and healing myself from toxic love, basically. And so in those sort of relationships, when you're more on the codependent side of the scale, typically what happens is like you actually undersuppress, like you haven't suppressed your needs, you haven't advocated for yourself in the relationship, which has led to a lot of mistreatment and all this sort of stuff, right? If you've attracted that sort of toxic person. And so when I started the podcast, I was like, this is probably like the perfect platform. And in a sense, it's like a full circle moment because I'd lost my voice for so many years. And by starting a podcast, it was like declaring like, I'm going to have a voice. And it wasn't really just for me. I was actually doing it for a lot of other women that, who were coming into my reality that were like, can you help me with this? How did you get over this? Tell us about your journey. And then I was like, oh, okay. So this is going to be probably the topic or the category that I can talk about. And then the ideas just like ran rampant. It was like wildfire. I like sat down and I just like automatically wrote everything out, like word vomit, wrote down all my ideas, brainstormed, mind mapped the whole thing, just was totally in flow with it. And that's when I realized this is really aligned. And I also realized there's a point in time where you have to actually action your ideas and not just think about it and like live in dreamland and fantasy world forever. You actually have to, like, if it feels like the right decision for you, you actually have to go ahead and create that podcast. So that was a big step for me. I had a lot of confidence issues. It took me 6 months to get over myself and get myself out of my way to start it. And I actually started my podcast before my business too, which I think is really important for people to know, because you don't have to start a podcast just for a business, but it definitely can be a wonderful avenue to add to your business too. So I started the podcast on the 3rd of December, 2018. And then literally in January, I signed on my business coach. I wasn't expecting to hire anyone and really get the business going. But once I started the podcast and I got into a role and I started to build a bit more self-trust, I was like, yeah, this could be a thing. And then ever since, it's turned into like a huge passion of mine. I still listen to Kara's podcast, and I've discovered Amanda Francis since then, who I've fallen in love with. At first I didn't, because I wasn't really ready to hear what she had to say, but then I definitely warmed up to her, and now I'm obsessed with her podcast as well. And then I've basically grown it over 11,000 downloads now. And I personally think it would be more if it wasn't for a few reasons. The coronavirus has definitely slowed down a lot of podcasting downloads across the board for the most part, but not for everyone. And also I pivoted my business out of narcissistic relationships and helping women get over breakups and marriages and stuff into business coaching. So I had to build that know, like, and trust all over again with a whole new audience, because some of them still wanted to listen, but a lot of them dropped off because they're like, they're basically dealing with crises in their life. They're not ready to start a business for the most part. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
That's so cool. I love that you say that you started your podcast as kind of like an empowerment tool for yourself, like finding your voice again and like empowering yourself to share your voice and speak your truth, because that's like a huge thing that I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with like showing up authentically and like speaking your truth and owning your power and saying what you have to say. So I love that was part of your journey. I didn't know that about you. And I think that is really cool. And I like how you've like taken this all and kind of like pivoted it toward the business and toward more of like helping other people do the same thing. So what do you think really led your podcast into having that many downloads so quickly?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So there's a few things that pop up when I think about this. So the word authenticity is so important, and I know it's a word that can be really overused, but the meaning behind it is still extremely, extremely important in podcasting. Because if you're fake or phony, or you're putting on an act, or you're trying to copycat someone else, or whatever it is, people can feel it. They can hear it in your tone, and they can feel it in the energy, when they're listening to you. And that's one thing you do really well, Juliana, is like you do show up very authentically, and you're very honest
Thank you.
with your people, which I love. I'm just like, yeah, give us more of that. So I think it's a few things. It's like speaking directly to, like, what I did is I had an idea of my ideal listener, or who it was. And I didn't even use those words back then, right? I had no idea what ideal client, ideal listener, ideal avatar was, none of that stuff. It was just kind of like, who am I showing up for? What does she look like? What is she struggling with? How can I help her? What's a problem that she's got going on? What keeps her up at night? What gets her up in the morning? What is her biggest struggle? And then how can I actually help her through that? And because I'd walked the walk, I knew how to teach and how to, inform and how to educate and empower and all that sort of jazz, right? So I had like literally the stage of healing that she was at, the sort of things she'd need to hear. I basically created a podcast for the old version of myself, like when I was going through all that shit. Can I swear?
Yeah,
is that okay?
Totally.
Okay.
110%.
Great. So when I was going through that really shitty, awful, like for me, it was a really terrible time in my life. I would have really loved a podcast like that to listen to. And back then I didn't even know about podcasts. I didn't know about life coaching, didn't know about coaching in general, really, didn't know about podcasting. And so I just created the podcast for my old self. And then that's what attracted a lot of people into listening to it. And I was just really honest about what kind of went on, but I did get very clear on my message. I was like, do I want to be a podcast for women where they're stuck in victimhood and they're just talking about their problems? And I'm like, no, like I want to be able to lead them to something happier, help them shift, transform their mindset, change their energy, make their lives better. And when it came from a space of that, I definitely, like, I got so many messages literally around the world. And I was like, holy crap, like people were listening in Dubai, Pakistan, Canada, the US, the UK, like all these places that I honestly hadn't even really thought about it ever getting to, especially not in the first couple of months. But at the same time, now that I've pivoted, I do still get messages, but nowhere near on the level that I used to get them. And I think for that reason is actually because, like, as I said before, the two reasons, pivoting, coronavirus, all that sort of stuff. But I think as well is like, when you work in such a niche area like narcissistic relationships, there's so much pain in that, so much emotion, so much heartbreak and all that sort of stuff. So people really connect with it. So when it comes to like this area of podcasting, that's why it's even more important to show up authentically and get really clear on their pain points, like your ideal listeners' pain points, so they can relate to it. Yeah. Like you don't listen to a podcast if it's not empowering, educational, relatable, interesting, something that you can actually take away from that, something valuable. So yeah, I think that answers the question a little bit, but I definitely had a few more points where my mind has gone blank.
It's okay. If you think of them, we can come back to them. But yeah, I think it's like really important, no matter what you're doing, to make people feel seen, heard, and understood. Like no matter what industry you're in, no matter what niche you're in, like that's what people want. They want to feel seen, heard, and understood. And I think you did such a good job of that with your podcast, like giving a voice to these people who were going through the same shit that you went through. So how were these people finding you? Like, because you said you had listeners like all over the world. How do you think they were finding you? Was it just through like keyword research? Like, what do you think now looking back on it was like the marketing strategy behind that?
Yeah. So good question as well. So what I did was, so I started the podcast before really realizing the volume of people out there that had the same problem as what I did, right? Needing to heal and recover after toxic love. And so what I did was I literally shared and talked about it everywhere. Not in the first couple of months because I was really shy. I'm more naturally of an introvert. And then, wearing my heart on my sleeve like that made me feel extremely exposed and vulnerable. But at the same time, that's what got people wanting to listen to it. So what I did was, once I actually started the podcast and started taking things seriously and not just like a willy-nilly little passion project, I actually looked on Facebook and looked for all these different Facebook groups where my ideal people were hanging out. And funnily enough, that's where I was hanging out, right? So I'm a huge fan of attraction marketing.
Me too.
So yeah. it's just kind of like you put your stuff out there and the right people come. Yeah, it's not like you've got to chase anyone. You don't have to knock on anyone's doors. It's just like you do your thing and the right people rock up. And that's pretty much what it was like. So I literally, I already was in a lot of Facebook groups that were about this particular topic. And then I just started searching, and I started searching for more. And in the end, I found about 150 different Facebook groups, which had a collective of around, I think it was at the time, 250,000 people worldwide. And
Wow.
I sat there and I was like, holy shizzle, like that's a lot of people. Imagine if even half of those people actually listened to my podcast, because it was aimed for women. So I thought, just say 50%, if not more, of those people were actually in those groups, because women are more likely to reach out for help than men in this particular circumstance. And I was like, even if half of those people listen to that, that's like a huge volume of people. And so that's what really motivated me even more. Like, I started actually sharing. I didn't promote the podcast, but I definitely started sharing, like, helpful hints and advice and things that helped me along my journey, and just really personalized my posts that, wasn't all about me, but could actually be for them. Like, what can they get out of this if I share it? So by doing that, they were kind of attracted to my stuff anyway. And then on my Facebook page, it had what my podcast was called. And it was like a natural organic funnel in a sense, where they just looked me up, like attracted to my stuff or the comments that I wrote that added value to their lives in some respect. They'd check out my Facebook page, and then there's my podcast in my bio. And so they'd naturally go on and listen to it. And then the people that would reach out to me with, like, frequently asked questions like, Olivia, my narc is doing this. What do I do about this? It's like, cool, I've got a podcast episode on that. Feel free to have a listen. Here's the link. Let me know if you've got any questions, if it's not answered, and we can chat about that more. Do you know what I mean? So it was just purely like free advice, like helping them tap into their inner wisdom and all this sort of stuff. So they were kind of like, then they'd tell their friends, and then it just kind of like spread and spread and spread. And you've got to talk about it too, like no one's going to know that you have a podcast if you don't share it with people, make it searchable. So, the problem that you solve should be something that people can actually look up for themselves. So, for example, a lot of my people back then were looking up breakups, breakdowns of marriages, how to get over, your ex, that sort of thing, what to do when you're abused, like all of this sort of stuff. And so I'd have those keywords in my title, in my show notes, in the description. And then it got to the point where I was actually sharing it on Instagram a lot. So I'm a huge Instagram lover. I'm always on stories, and like I just share it on stories that have audiograms. So it's kind of like, if you think about a movie, every movie, if they're good, they have a little movie trailer. And so that trailer is called an audiogram for podcasting. So you can have an image or a moving image or whatever, and then you'd have like subtitles or text on there, and you just share it on your feed or on your stories, and you just constantly show up. Like, that's the really key thing here. People don't really realize. It's like, they do the whole thing of like starting a podcast, but it's like, that's just the beginning. There's so much more than that. It's not like you just have a baby and you neglect it, right? You've got to feed that baby. You've got to, keep it fed and watered. You've got to clothe it. You've got to nurture it. You've got to help grow it. And it's the same thing with a podcast. That's how I view my podcast. And so you've got to consistently show up and pour love into it. And it's the same thing when you have a podcast and a business.
Yeah, it's the same thing with any platform. Like, I'm always talking about how consistency is key. Like, the little like formula thing that I use is like magnetic energy plus consistency equals results. And it's true. And like, yes, there are obviously like deeper strategies that you can get into and deeper like sales psychology things. But I feel like the people who just show up consistently and actually have like good content, no matter what platform it's on, like, those are the people who see results. So that consistency piece is huge. And I see so many people struggling with this because they'll make one post and then they're like, why didn't anyone buy my thing? I'm like, you have to do a lot more than that. Like, people are always shocked when I say, like, on average, I post in my Facebook group 6 times a day, and on my personal profile, like 2 to 3 on Facebook. I'm on Facebook probably more than I am on Instagram. But like, I've been trying to give my Instagram some more love lately. So every day I'm trying to like at least show up on stories and like do something. And then I try to have a feed post, and those are like my things. So like, I'm showing up a lot, and that's why I get results. And like, you show up a lot too, and that's why you get results. And I feel like people think it's like this big magical thing, and it's just not. And it's the same thing with a podcast. Like, if you want to have it, okay, cool. But it's going to take work to grow it.
Like, yeah, I agree. 100%. 100%. Like, this is the thing, right? Like, there's 2 things. So like anything with your business or your podcast or whatever platform you want to grow, you can't just put one thing out there and expect to get results overnight unless you're someone that's already famous or has a big following or has lots of likes or sold lots of books or whatever, right? Like it's the way I liken it to is like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym once and expect to have a six pack. Yeah. Like it takes consistency. I know, me too. It's like maintenance. It's all about maintenance. And this is something that I actually ask my clients at the start of our journey for the most part is like, what are you better at? Starting things, maintaining things, or finishing things? And the way that they answer
that's such a good question.
Yeah.
That's such a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. It tells you a lot about that person. Like it tells you a lot. If they're good at starting things, it's like, do they start a lot of things and they get shiny thing syndrome and then they're always starting things but never finishing things? Or are they really good at maintenance? Because as you know, in business, it's about showing up consistently. It's about maintaining, getting that momentum rolling with it. And like anything with manifestation, it doesn't necessarily just like, it's really great when things do drop in your lap, but for the most part, you've got to show up and do your 50% to be rewarded with that result or that desired outcome, or for the universe to give you what it is that your heart desires. You don't just sit there and magically wish for $1 million and it drops in your lap as you're thinking about it. Like that's unrealistic.
Yeah. I have a line that I like to say that's like, you can't just meditate and make money.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what so many people expect. And like, unfortunately, like there are a lot of people that are basically teaching that out there. Like, oh, you just have to feel good and then you'll get what you want. And it's like, no, you don't realize like these people are doing a lot of work on the back end. And like, maybe they're not talking about the work that they're doing, but like they're showing up, they're creating content, and like, it doesn't get to be as easy as just like wishing for it and like thinking good thoughts. Like that's not how it works. And
how does anything work like that? Let's think about it, right?
Yeah,
like you have a job.
Doesn't.
Like if you have a 9-to-5 job, you don't rock up every Monday and that's it, right? If you have a full-time job, you've got to rock up every day. Like that's what your boss expects from you. If you're a business owner, it's the same thing, right? But for yourself, which is so much better in my opinion. It's like the gym. It's like having a relationship with a person. You don't just put in 1 ounce of effort and expect to have a dream relationship for the rest of your life. You've got to keep investing yourself in that. You've got to keep showing up in it and working on it and enjoying it, having fun with it. And I think that's where people go wrong as well, is like, I don't even like the word work, but there's like no replacement for it. If you think of it as work and like you have to do it or should do it, then energetically you're not going to want to show up like that. If you feel like it's an obligation, like there's definitely a level of that, but if it's your purpose and your passion, you want to do it. It's fun to do it. It's fulfilling to do it. And so if you've got that sort of block going on, maybe that thing isn't right for you. And some self-reflection has to kind of happen to move you forward, and consistency is key. Like I love the saying persistence pays off. It's been 100% true for me in my life in many different situations. And I think my superpower is action. It took me ages to get to this point. I was stuck in that training cycle of thinking I needed to know more. I wasn't skilled enough. I had to do this next thing before I actually actioned things. But once I took the perfectionism away, like that all or nothing mindset or attitude, like done is better than perfect is like my next principle. Like,
yes.
As long as it's done, that's enough. Like it's always enough. As long as you show up, that's enough. Like I was tagged in a post by my business coach yesterday, I think it was, and she was congratulating 3 of us for some of our results. And one of the other girls in the program, said, congratulations, well done, something like that. And I was like, well done to you as well. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, she's like, I've got no results. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. Like you're actually here, like you're showing up and you're cheering other people on. Like if you keep doing that consistently, you will get rewarded. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, it's all about progress over perfection and like celebrating the small things too. And I think that's something that like I could get better at. And I know a lot of like my clients could get better at too, is like not everything has to be like this big milestone goal to celebrate it. Like celebrating the small things is important too.
Oh yeah. Like with my podcast even, I celebrated every time I got 1,000 downloads. Like I celebrated the first download I got, which by the way, I had no one listening to my podcast at the beginning because I didn't have much of a following and didn't have the business. So it was literally just me talking into thin air is how it felt. And then it built from there. I celebrated the first download, which was the first listener. I celebrated the first 10 downloads, right? First 100 and then first 1,000. And every 1,000 after that, I celebrated. And it doesn't have to be anything massive and over the top. Like, you don't even have to have like a podcast launch party or anything that grand. It can literally just like cheersing yourself with some champagne, or it can be having a nice relaxation bath, or treating yourself to the movie, gold class, or, buying that top that you've been eyeing off for 2 months or something, right? Like, it doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be money. It can just be like intentionally sitting down and, doing something different than what you normally would do, or something that you do enjoy. Like, you need to celebrate. And that was a big thing I learned from my first business, was I wasn't celebrating my progress at all, really. And I think that's what kind of led to it not lasting, was because I wasn't smelling the roses along the way. I was very attached to the outcome. I wanted that $1 million team. I wanted, this award and this, that, and the other. And I realized once I did get some results, I was kind of like, that stuff doesn't, like, it matters, but it's not my main driving force. And so you've got to celebrate every little win, even starting the podcast, like the technical setup, celebrate that. Yeah. That's a hump in itself.
It is. That's like one of the hardest parts. So let's talk about that since we're on it. So what do you think, and then I'll give my perspective on this too, but what do you think people need in order to start? From
a technical standpoint?
Yeah.
Nothing. So I feel like there's this big, like, I know people will cringe if they're into podcasting or audio or production or anything like that. They will cringe if I say you don't need anything. But I don't think that you do. If you are broke and don't have any money, right? Like, if you've got money, great, go buy a decent microphone. Doesn't have to be the best of the best. Doesn't have to be the shittiest one either. But like, if you've got the money, go invest in that, claim it on tax, whatever you set up. If it makes you embody that, persona of being a podcast hostess, then 100% go do that. But I don't think you even need that to get started. The biggest thing is just fucking getting started. Like, that's the biggest. It's getting over yourself, moving through any confidence issues, and just creating it. And you can build it from there. So I remember talking of Amanda Francis before. I was listening to one of her podcast episodes. This would have been about maybe 6 months to a year ago now. And, she's a millionaire, right? Like, she's extremely successful. She's, built everything from scratch. Like, she's such an inspiration. And then she did like this podcast episode down at the beach on her iPhone, and the quality was still good. And I was like, that just proved to me, because I got a microphone right off the bat. I did all the things everyone told me that I should do. I did it, great, it worked, and it's still working. But I don't even necessarily believe that you have to have a microphone. Like, as long as you have you and you can speak, that is enough.
Yeah, I know, like, my MacBook actually records really good sound. And like, I only have a microphone because my boyfriend Tanner bought it for his one podcast episode that he did 16 months ago.
So what, he started a podcast, but it wasn't for him? What happened?
Yeah, I don't know. He started a podcast, but like, it's such a niche thing that it's like, I don't know. He just hasn't done another one, and he keeps talking about doing it. And I'm like, so it's going to be like your year and a half long, every like year and a half annual episode. And he's like, yeah.
A one-hit wonder.
Yeah. But if anyone wants to go creep on his podcast, it's called Under the Pink Dome. It's about the Texas legislature and Texas history. He's great. I love him. He's great. I love him. But like, we are so different people. But yeah, so he bought all of the podcast stuff, and also, like, bless him, helped me set up like all of the techie stuff, because he knows how to do it. Like, he's really good at tech. So I guess, like, really, yeah, like, you don't need the microphone. I don't think you need any of like the fancy tech setup. What you need to set it up is you need somewhere to host it, right? So like, I host mine on my Squarespace, because the way that a podcast works is it goes through an RSS feed, especially if you want to upload it to like iTunes and Spotify, which are like the main two platforms. So you need somewhere to host it. What do you use to host yours? Do you use like Libsyn or anything like that?
Yeah. So what I did was I spent way too long overthinking all of this, right? So if someone gives you advice on how to technically start up a podcast, just go and do that thing. Save yourself 2 weeks of like going crazy and, hearing all this conflicting advice and information. Just whatever you hear, go do the thing. Just do it. Oh, hello. We're just talking about your podcast.
He just walked in the door. We were talking about your podcast, Tanner.
Which one? How many downloads has it got?
I don't know. How many downloads do you have? Do you know? He doesn't know.
I'd love to know. Get him to tell you, and you can message me later, because I'd love to know the organic reach on one podcast episode.
Yes.
Anyway, so I use Libsyn. So what I did was I actually reached out to some of the podcast. This is the thing, right? Reach out to the people that have podcasts. Yeah, like you don't just have to sit there and be in the background and be a passive listener. If you want to, go for it. But if you want to start your own podcast, you don't know where to start, reach out to the people that already have a podcast and see what they say. I reached out to about 3 people and they all responded, and they all had different ways of doing things. And that's when I was just kind of like, okay, cool. What's the easiest option? Because I know that I'm going to back out if I don't do this now. Yeah. So I signed up to Libsyn. They're fantastic, very professional. They've got all these different types of plans you can get with statistical analysis and blah, 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 blah. Once again, don't get too overwhelmed with all the details. As long as you get started, that's the main thing if you are feeling aligned to starting a podcast. And then all the strategy and all that learning stuff can come later. Usually it's the biggest thing is just actually doing the thing. So I use Libsyn to host my podcast, and the way it's kind of like, how do I explain it? Like when you have a podcast, you actually have to upload it to somewhere on the cyber world to actually hold it there for you. And then it can spread to different platforms. So Libsyn is like my little home for my podcast. And then I've linked up things like YouTube to that. So when I upload an episode, it goes straight onto YouTube on my channel. It goes straight to Spotify on there, and any other like iTunes and any other podcasting app, it just gets automatically uploaded to that. So if you don't have those links, or you don't have a host that actually spreads your podcast for you, it's just going to stay in that podcast home and no one's really going to know about it. And it may not matter straight away, but over time, like the whole point of starting a podcast and building it is so it reaches people, right? So you don't want to just being in this cyber world not getting anywhere. You actually want people to listen and it be available to people. So yeah, and the other thing too is like one thing I would suggest for people that already have a podcast and are building it, reach out to your host and see if you can be an affiliate for them. And my podcast manager was like, why don't you reach out to Libsyn and see if they will sponsor you? Or, help your bundle members get a cheaper deal if they sign up to Libsyn as their podcast host. And I was like, that's a fantastic idea. So I've actually got a phone call booked in with some dude from Libsyn, seeing if I can, actually refer people to them and get them a discount.
Yeah. If you get that, let me know, because I'll put it in the show notes if you want me to, your affiliate link good. Or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, there's like a million different ways to do it, because I have mine on my Squarespace, and then what I had to do was I had to take that RSS feed link and upload it to the places that I wanted. So my main 2 that I cared about were iTunes and Spotify, because I know basically all of my people are going to be on one of those 2. But I also think I put it on TuneIn or Stitcher or a few of the other ones. But the 2 that I promote are iTunes and Spotify. And then all I had to do was have that one-time RSS feed within the back end of my Squarespace. There's a podcasting thing, and then all I have to do is go enter the info in there. So it's super easy, you guys. You can record on Zoom, which is usually what I do, or I've started now recording in GarageBand. So GarageBand or Audacity are 2 of the programs. Pick one. If you have a Mac, I think GarageBand is better. But Audacity basically does the same thing, and it's free. And you can just upload your audio to there. You don't need an intro unless you want to make a fancy intro. I had one, and even that wasn't that hard. You don't need an outro. You don't need ads. You can add all of that stuff on later. But what matters is the meat of the content, right? Just what are you giving people? What is it about? Why are they listening? You really don't need all of the fancy stuff. You can totally do it yourself if you don't want to hire a team, or you're not able to hire a team right now. It also doesn't need to be super edited. I don't edit my shit. Unless something really awful happens, I'm not going to edit it. One time Loki knocked everything over, and then I had to edit the middle because it was me screaming at Loki.
I would have liked to have listened to that.
He should have let that in. Oh, he's such a love. It's my cat, for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure I've talked about him on this podcast before. But yeah, I feel you don't need that many things. You just need somewhere to put it. You need to upload it. And then you need to probably have a cover, and you can do that in Canva.
Yeah, for free.
So, am I missing anything? Is there anything that you would add to the bare minimums of what you kind of have to set it up?
Nope, I think you've covered it. I think the other thing is like one thing I love about, once again, running your own business and podcast or whatever it is that you want to create is like there's no rules. You get to decide however the fuck you want it to be. So
Yes.
like, yeah, like don't overcomplicate it. Yeah, this is the thing. People get stuck on overcomplicating it, thinking it has to be perfect. The first draft is going to suck. It's not going to be the best, and that's okay. Like with any skill, like the first time you drove a car, it probably wasn't the best time you did it. The first time you rode a bike, you probably weren't an expert at that either, right? So
I'm still not good at either of those.
Yeah. I don't know, but there you go. So there you go, guys. So don't let it stop you, right? So I think bare minimum wise, you just have to have a title. It's always good to write a bit of description about what it is, because then it kind of hooks the people that are like wanting to a bit of a reader and like to do their research first. So just have a basic description. It doesn't have to be anything over the top. Do the recording, upload it. And then once you've done that, then you can polish it up if you want to. Like if you want to have a fancy intro and an outro, you can do that. If you want to have a call to action, you can do that. All this stuff can change. Yeah. Your cover art, just get it done, make it look like it's decent. And then, from there in a couple of months, you can redo it again. Like it's all changeable. It doesn't have to be set from the start and it's that way forever. Like I know people that have, they update all their stuff every 6 months, like a new intro, a new outro, a new song, a new title for their podcast. Like me, I pivoted, right? So I had to start everything from scratch all over again. I kept the episodes there, but a whole new name, a whole new perspective, topic, category, all of that. So just do it and then worry about all the details later, would be my opinion on that. And I used Audacity as well. So I just watched a few YouTube videos on how to do some basic editing stuff. And once again, it's not that hard. Just sit down when you've got some time. Don't expect it to happen in 2 seconds. Like you've got to learn this whole new skill. And then you just apply it. And then you get better and better at it because you keep doing it. And practice doesn't always make perfect, but you get better, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, you guys can Google everything. And I think that's like one of the most important things to know, because I had a lot of people asking me like, oh, like how much do you pay your team that does your podcast? I'm like, I don't pay a team to do my podcast. Like, I just do it myself. Like everything was either I figured it out or Tanner helped me or I just Googled it. Like you can Google everything. Like the internet is a wonderful place.
Yeah,
So
everything is Googleable and figure outable.
yeah.
You don't need a degree. You don't need a lot. I think that's the main thing we're trying to say. That's for sure. Like now I have a team. So like some people love editing too, by the way. Like, so when I first, got my team, I was like, oh my God, everyone needs to have one of these. It saves you so much time. And then I realized some people really actually love the editing side of things. Some people get like a real kick out of doing absolutely every little detail. And I'm like, cool, if that's you, go for it. I know for me, like I found that very time consuming, but I wouldn't necessarily get a team straight away unless you have like literally no time and a high functioning business and you're pulled in lots of directions. But it's actually good for you to kind of know how things work on a basic level as a foundation, so that when you do want to build a team and, hand it over to someone else to manage it for you, you kind of know if you're being ripped off or not. You're kind of like, oh, are they trying to charge me $50 for that when really it's like a 2-second job and it doesn't take any time at all? Like you knowing the basics is actually really going to help you in the long run. And if you don't ever want to hire a team or outsource, that's okay too. As I said, no rules. Be a rule breaker. Do what you want.
Yeah, I'm totally a rule breaker because I'm one of those people that like I've had, consecutive 5-figure months in my business and I don't have a team. And people are like, you need an OBM, you need a virtual assistant. I'm like, no, I don't. Like I'm able to handle all my shit. Like
yeah,
it's not hard. And I don't work that much. Like I don't know. I mean, at some point I will probably hire someone to do my Instagram marketing and engagement for me because that's like the shit that I hate. But beyond that, I'm like, I don't need someone to do all these things for me. And I've been totally fine, like getting to where I've gotten in my business without having anyone other than myself.
I agree. And I think no one should tell you, like in my opinion, especially from a coaching perspective, no one should tell you how to do life or your business or your podcast. Like, just take suggestions, take it with a grain of salt, do what you want with it. Like, this is what I say as well, right? Like, I'm actually a registered midwife and I work 2 days a week at a local hospital. And it's the same thing with new parents. Like, we've got all these different staff telling them different things and what they should or shouldn't do, how to breastfeed, how to do this, how to do that. And I just say to them, you know what? This is the way I do things. You may or may not like this way, and that's cool. Just take what you want from it, as well as all the other staff that come in and look after you over your, journey here. Like, because you're going to go home and do what you want anyway. So listen to your intuition. If you enjoy doing the thing, do the thing yourself. If it's something that drains you energetically and you're not a fan or you don't like it, you can always strategize and outsource that to someone else. But like, look at Juliana here. Like, you've actually come a really long way doing all of that on your own. Like, I think that's actually really phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
like,
business doesn't need to be hard.
It doesn't. It can be fun. And for me, the way I work is like, I just want to rock up and do all the fun stuff. Like, I'm not that person that's very like, if I get detail orientated, I get stuck in the details and my perfectionism gets in the way. So I know that that's a limitation of my personality. So I just want to do the fun stuff. I want to rock up for the Facebook and Instagram lives, the videos, the recordings, the coaching calls, and everything else. For the most part, I like to hand off because it's not that fun for me.
Yeah.
And it's got to be fun. Otherwise, what's the point? It's not worth it. You won't be sustainable.
Yeah, that's so true. So what are your top 3 tips for someone who's interested in starting a podcast?
Well, I have so much more than 3.
Okay. You can give more than 3. That's fine.
Awesome. So something I like to say is talk on purpose, talk with purpose. So I've listened to podcasts before where and once again, this is not to criticize anyone, but they've just talked a whole bunch of waffle. And I've sat there at the end of the episodes and I'm like, what the hell did I get from that? Right? Like, it's been something about their mom and then something about this toothpaste and then something about the world news. And I'm all for like, having a chat, but it's like people get onto podcasts for a specific reason. They want to be entertained, empowered, or educated. And just have a directed focus. Like, if you had a podcast that was about everything under the sun, it's like you wouldn't cover everything. And it's not searchable either. So I know when I wanted to become an entrepreneur, I was searching everything about entrepreneurialism, digital nomads, how to start a business, how to have a successful online business, how to get to my first 10,000 downloads, how to make consistent income. Like, that was the stuff that I was Googling, right? It was very focused, very specific. And like even my narcissistic podcast back in the day, it's like, if it was all about dating, love, marriages, every kit and caboodle to do with romance and platonic love, like, who's going to search for that, right? Unless you're already, as I said, famous, got a big following and you can go wide. But I think starting off narrow, having a niche or at least a directed focus is a good place to start. Know what you want to talk about. Yeah, give people a reason to jump on and want to listen to you. If you're talking about your dead toenail and then the dog next door, like, who's really going to, like, I know for me, that's probably not going to attract my attention, And your podcast can be literally about anything. So like, I even had a chat to my brother the other day. He's like, well, if you started a podcast about toothpaste, what would you talk about? If you sold toothpaste, how would you, have a podcast around that? And I'm like, great question. There's like so much you can talk about. Gum health, how to look after your gums, how to look after your teeth, the best toothbrushes out there, why your toothpaste is superior to other toothpaste, what's the ingredients that's, good for you or cancer causing, or, sell it to dentists, like promote it to dentists, reach out to different other companies, collaborate. Like, there's so much that you can do. So if you're sitting there and you're stuck for ideas, it's just because you haven't given yourself the space and time to really dream and to really allow ideas and downloads and stuff to drop in. So that's my first tip. Definitely talk with purpose, on purpose, and have an idea of what you want. I'm very kinesthetic, right? So massive into feelings, like tactile stuff. So figure out what kind of vibe you want your podcast to have. Is it going to be like super motivating and inspirational, or is it going to be more like laid back and flowy? Because like, I've listened to self-care podcasts before, and like the intro music they've got is very relaxing. It's like very acoustic guitar. Like, I imagine myself sitting in like a hotel room with like the breeze filtering in, or in Italy sipping a glass of wine in like, a winery. Like, have an idea of what your vibe is going to be. And what else would I say? I'd say, when people say do your research, like market research, I don't fully agree with that either. And the reason why I say that is because that's when comparisonitis can really creep in. So,
same. I don't like market research. We should do another podcast episode about this
ooh,
because I feel like I'm the only person that's like,
wow.
I don't like market research. And I mean, I do it to an extent. I'll be like, I'll ask like a question, but I'm not going to like build a program around market research. And I'm also not going to spend that much time doing market research because I feel like I know my person. So this has to be like a separate thing. So I don't want us to get off on a tangent right now, but
okay. It is nice to meet someone else that thinks the same way like that, because the amount of people that have told me to do market research, like, anyway, this is for another podcast episode, guys, but don't do too much, right? Because it'll stop you. You want things to make this process easy and smooth and fun. You don't want to get too in your head about it, and then you get stuck there, and then you never take the action steps to make this happen and create this dream and new reality for you. So go do the thing, just do it, as Nike says. The other thing is to personality plus. So, I know when I cringe when I think back to my first couple of episodes. My energy is like just so not on point. So not me. Do you know what I mean? Because I was trying to be like everyone else. I was trying to be like a podcast host. You know what it's like when you start a business and you feel like you've got to be a certain way. I think just chuck that out the window. And that's what can happen is if you do too much market research, you get caught up in that. Whereas if you tap into your inner wisdom and your intuition and go with what feels good, I think that's really great. Infuse your personality into it. If you've got a weird, strange, wacky sense of humor, that's cool. Like, you'll attract others that have got a similar sense of humor to you. Like, as Juliana and I just saw, it's like she's not a believer in market research either, really, to a certain extent.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, when you're first starting your business, like, yes, do market research because it will help you to nail down your clarity. But like, once you've figured your shit out and you know who your ideal client is, like, you don't need to do the market research.
Yeah. Well, even with my podcast, when I first started it, I didn't do, as I said, started the podcast first, and then I looked into Facebook groups and figured it all out.
Yeah.
I didn't know if anyone was going to listen to my podcast. I had no one listening, 0 downloads.
Yeah,
no
because
one.
the energy is more important. Like, the energy and the passion needs to come first.
Yeah. Once you have that, then the followers, the listeners, the clients, the customers, they all come. But they've got to have something to be drawn to. Yeah. So, so market research to me, not a big thing. Personality plus is important. If you're boring as shit and you're not showing yourself, people aren't going to listen. I remember I saw a Reddit post where it was quite a while ago now. It was like maybe 10 months ago. And this person wrote on there, does anyone know any podcast hosts that are actually fucking interesting? And I just laughed because I was like, I know what he's talking about. And the podcasts I listen to, they're like, I know I don't know them personally. I haven't met them, but like, I know the vibe, I know the flavor, I know what they stand for, I know a bit about the personality, I know how they show up. And that's what keeps me coming back for more, and why I keep listening to them. And I listen to like 5 on average, not more than that. Because I'm a busy person and I've got my own podcast to create. But like, yeah, let your personality shine through, whatever that looks like. Don't worry about judgment. Just do what feels right for you. Follow that inner being and just trust that. And the other thing as well is, like, I think take the spotlight off you. So a lot of people that are at the very beginning phases or are contemplating starting a podcast or have just started, maybe in the first 0 to 4 to 6 months, like, we can get very stuck in our heads about it being us and the download number and this, that, and the other and results. But it's like, as soon as you are doing that, it's like you've taken the focus off who you're actually showing up for. Like, you're taking the focus off the ideal listener that you're showing up for, your target audience, what you can help them with. If you feel like you're getting stuck in your head, or you've got confidence issues, or, you're starting to get imposter syndrome, or you're starting to procrastinate or sabotage, that's because you're focusing too much on you. Start focusing on who you're showing up for, and that will really help you.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Like, with anything that we do as business owners, is it's like, I literally said this in something that I was editing yesterday. I don't remember what exactly I said, but I re-listened to it and I was like, damn, that was good. Because I like repurposed some content training that I did. But basically, like, people don't give a shit about you. Like, they do a little bit. But what they really give a shit about is like how you're helping them. And like, they would rather get help from someone that they like, but like, they don't give a shit about you. And I see a lot of people I don't know. I don't even know if it's messing it up, because I see a lot of people who have like huge followings do this. And I think this is why I don't vibe with a lot of the people out there who are like, you know, quote unquote, like top industry leaders, because it's all about them. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck about you and your dog and like how that relates to your manifestation business or whatever it is. Like, I don't want to hear about your day, even if it is like supposed to be like a storytelling thing. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you see this, but I'm like, I want to know what's in it for me. Like, I'm selfish and people are selfish. Like, how does this relate to me? How is it going to help me? How is it going to help me like either become a better person or become a better business owner or make more money or whatever my goal is of listening to like that podcast episode?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Like,
so
I definitely understand where you're coming from, because like, it's so true, because even when I think back to the start of my journey, and even now, like, you know, you and I, we're busy people, right? We're not sitting around like painting our toenails and, you know, drinking Mai Tais and we're unemployed. Like, we have shit to do. Like, we have a purpose, we're doing stuff. Yeah. And so and the internet's a really noisy place. There's like so many podcasts, there's so many different social media platforms. It's very loud. And so when you're over-consuming or you're bombarded with stuff all day long, because, you know, I run an online business, so I'm always online, and, you know, you're dealing with your life stuff, it's like you just want to know what you need to know to get what you need to get or go where you need to go. So when Betty rocks up and she talks about her goldfish and the day that she's had and gets to the end of a podcast episode, and you're sitting there and you're like, was that like a waste of half an hour, or did I actually walk away with something that has been interesting or helpful? Like, that's a big thing. I remember someone sent me a YouTube video. Like, it's funny too, like the busier you get, the more people know about you, so they send you all this stuff to read and watch, and you just don't always have the time to do that.
Yes.
Right? Like,
oh my gosh, that has happened to me so much lately.
yeah, it's like really sweet. It's like, thank you so much for thinking of me, but I don't have the fucking time to watch an hour video on something that is necessary for me right now, you know? That sounds so mean, and I don't mean it to sound that way, but, you know, if you're kind of at our stage, you'll be sitting there and going, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And she was really lovely. She was from the narcissistic space. She'd gotten involved with my podcast, loved listening to it. She was like 13, no, not even 13. I think she was a teenager, started a YouTube channel, sent me a video of her YouTube, and really sweet. And I so commend her on getting started and having the confidence to get out there and share her stuff. But it was supposed to be on makeup, and all it was her and her girlfriend sitting there having a chat about high school boys, swimming in the pool, like not even telling me what products they were using. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, why am I watching this? Like, who do you think is going to be searching for your YouTube video to, like, that people search to learn stuff, right? Like, people search podcasts, YouTube, Google, because it's a search engine. They want to solve something to their problem or their question. They want to figure something out. So give that to them. Don't just like waste their time. And this is what I mean by like doing like directed focus and talking with a purpose, because people are busy. Like, everyone has stuff going on and they want to walk away with something tangible, whether it be actually physical, whether it be more emotional or mental. Like, give them a reason to listen. And if they're rocking up to give their time to listen to you, make it worth it for them. That's how I feel.
Yeah, 100%. Like, creating content with intention is something that I talk about all the time, because people always ask, like, is it better to have quantity or quality when it comes to content? And I think it's a little bit of both, but for sure quality. Like, I think if you can do both quality and quantity, then like props to you, because that's what's going to get you really far. That's like what has gotten me to where I am, is because I produce a lot of content, but it's all like quality stuff. But if you're not able to do that, like, don't just create something to create something, like, especially with podcasts, because I feel like people try to do them like on a weekly basis. And like, if you don't have something to say that week, I feel like just don't say it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. So this is funny, because when I first started, it was like, there was this presumption at the time where it's like, you have to be saying, you know, for the next podcast episode, tune in every Wednesday. And I'm so not that person. I'm organized, but I'm not that organized. And like, I'm all about inspired action too, right? So it's like, if you feel inspired to do something, do it while that feeling's there. But don't just do it because you feel obligated to or you have to, because energetically you're not going to be showing up as your best. And so if you're coming from that space, and this is what I've learned from Amanda Francis, is like, if you're coming from an energy of lack or not wanting to do it, or you're not feeling inspired, or you're just doing it because it feels like a responsibility, you're not going to show up as your best anyway. So why waste your time? Why waste the listener's time? You know, like, and so I don't think I'll ever be that person that's like, tune in every Monday for my next podcast episode. Like, I wish I could be, but I don't work like that. It's just
I don't
not me.
either. I don't like scheduling stuff. I try to have as little things scheduled as possible.
Oh, I love that. The only thing I have scheduled in really is like my coaching sessions in my diary. Any interviews or pre-interviews, my own coach's, you know, sessions with me and her programs and my own programs. Other than that, I try to make it as fluid as I can, because like I'm not a robot, and creatively you can't squeeze much out of me when I'm just too regimented or too structured either.
Yeah. Yeah. Like for a while I was trying to, and I still do try to do this because I get better engagement on them and I see the strategy behind it. Like I was trying to do like my Facebook lives in my group at like a certain time and on a certain day. But sometimes I just really don't want to go live. And if I don't want to go live, it's not going to be a good live.
I even like with Facebook Lives, like I agree with you, like even with Facebook Lives, people are always like, you know, warm up the audience, let them know that you're going live at this time. But I just find that when I do that, it just feels so forced. Like I do it sometimes when I'm like, I know I'm going to be in the state and in the mood for it, but then I feel like I've got to put it on when I'd rather just kind of go live in that moment, in that instant, do the thing, enjoy it, show up the best way I can while I feel inspired, rather than put it off till tomorrow and then be like, you know, for that live, tune in at 10 o'clock. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, it just feels like I'm not an actress. I can't just like switch it on for the audience. Do you know what I mean? Like I do it when I feel like I want to do it.
Yeah. There are definitely things that like I do to shift my energetic state to like get in the mood, because I'm all about balance. Like,
yes,
if you can create from a place of creating inspired when you're actually like wanting to, then do it. But like I definitely have weeks where like I don't want to do shit. And if I don't do shit for that week, then like I'm not going to get results because I'm not being consistent. So it's like that balance of like create the most stuff as you can when you're in a good mood. And that's when I will like batch content or like do a bunch of things. But also one of the things that I say is like 30% is better than 0%. 50% is better than 0%. Like, because if you look at things from like, think about like your content as like being graded, kind of like it was graded in school, right? It's probably not going to be 100%, and that's okay. But if you don't do anything, it's a 0%. And so it's still better to get like a 30%, 50%, or even 80% than it is to get a 0.
Yes, that's why done is better than perfect, 100%.
Yes.
Yeah. There's definitely like, I think at the end of the day, you can go two extremes. It can be not doing anything at all, or it could be doing too much.
Yes.
And it's about finding that middle balance. Like that, I think is, you know, and the word balance in business is not always like, I think harmonious is better than balance, because, you know, I actually love working a lot. I'm a bit of, I wouldn't say a workaholic, but I love doing a lot of business stuff all day long.
Me too.
And off. Yeah. And then some days I have days where I'm like, I just want to do 2 or 4 hours and then call it a day. And then, you know, I need to get back to my feminine flow and not be so masculine with getting shit done and that hustle mode, because I'm definitely someone that can get stuck in that hustle mode. And I've got to, you know, really feel my feminine flow as well, because that's when I best create my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like when it comes to consistently showing up for a podcast, it's like knowing how many episodes you do want to pump out. So for me, I've got 2 hours of audio a month, and I can structure that however I want. So like an hour interview and then 2 half-hourly episodes, or I can just do 4 half-hourly episodes. And I know that that's the goal. And so I just make it happen every month. So it's like, it's not every Monday I've got to go do my podcast episode. I might write the content that day and then record it on Thursday. But it's done that week. And I know that I will be in an energetic state at some stage in that week to do it. And there, as you said, definitely things you can do to get into state and manage your energy. And then sometimes it's about just like harnessing the natural energy so you can get the most out of it. So I think you're right. It's got to be a mixture of like getting the shit done, knowing it doesn't have to be perfect, but then not neglecting it either, and not expecting it to be top quality every single time, because you are not a machine. You are not a robot. So yeah, that's what I'd suggest.
Yeah. So what are your last words for the people before we wrap this up? Do you have any last burning things about podcasts or business you want to say? This is I like to give people like the time to just like have the floor. So
yeah. Oh, okay. I think, okay, cool. So once you've actually created the podcast technically and creatively it's done, and you're maybe like a couple of, episodes or months into it, then start thinking about how you can grow it even more. And a space that I really love coming from is a space of collaboration over competition. So instead of going, and like this is things, a lot of people work through this, right? Like I went from a super, super niche of like romance, romantic love, breakups, codependent women, narcissistic men, and then all the pain points of like people pleasing. Like it was very, very, very specific. It was very niched down. And then I went into business coaching, and that felt a bit more open to me. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I had to niche that down. So what I'm trying to say is like, I think when you get clearer and clearer on who it is you're speaking to, then it can't hurt to actually collaborate with other people. Because, in my previous podcast, I had lots of different coaches on. Yeah, like I had so many different people in the same sort of space, like dating coaches, romance or relationship coaches, divorce coaches. I didn't sit there and go, they're my competition. I don't want to have them on my podcast because, like I'm against them, so to speak. It's about bringing them on and working together and actually thinking once again about the ideal listener and how you can best serve them. It's like, cool, does this divorce coach have something that's really going to serve my people? So I think collaborate over competition is a really big key thing as well. And by collaborating with other podcasters or interviews and interviewing each other or whatever it is, you get to serve two audiences and cross-contaminate those. So like even for example with Cara Elwell-Labour, I discovered Amanda Francis through her podcast, through an interview that Cara did with Amanda. And they're in similar spaces somewhat, but they don't come at it as like they're each other's competition. They're like friends in real life. Yeah. And they work together. So that's a really great way of building your audience as well, I think. What else would I say? Take your audience along the journey with you too, by the way. So you might start a podcast or a business, for example. You think this is what you want to do. Later on, you might outgrow it or it might not feel aligned anymore and you want to go in a different direction. That's all okay. Just take people along with you. Like, I think that's actually a really good thing because then they get to know you a little bit more. It still builds that know, like, and trust. They feel like they're along the journey with you. Like even, once again, if I'm really promoting Cara here, but like, I've been through the journey.
I like her.
I feel like I've been along her life journey somewhat with what she's, kind of shared with her audience. And I know she's very private about a lot of things, but it's like, I was listening to her when, she published a couple of books and released those and marketed those and then had her shop front that she created to work from. And, now she's getting divorced. So it's kind of like, I feel like I followed her journey and her podcast and it's made me like her even more. And the other thing too, just to touch on is like before when we're talking about how, people just want to know what they need to know from you and get what they need to get. And they don't really care about all the fluffy stuff. I feel like at the start, yes. And then I think as time goes on, they get more curious and they want to know more about you. Once they know that they can learn something from you and you have value to offer them specifically and personally, then they start kind of want to know a bit more. Like I know even with you, Juliana, it's like, I got to know you and then I was like, oh, she's a cat lady too. How awesome is that? And like for me, cat people are the minority because everyone's like dog people. So I'm like, oh, there's another similarity. And then we both found out where type 4's on the Enneagram. And it's like, oh, there's another similarity. So it's like common threads.
Yeah, I feel like we're really similar in a lot of ways. What is your Myers-Briggs type? Do you know that one?
INFJ.
Okay. I'm INFP or ENFP. I'm like super 50-50 introvert, extrovert.
Oh my God.
So we're like, we're in like the same, we're like in the same like NF fam though. Cause like, I could, nerd out about personality types all day, but like everyone that has like the N and the F is like in the same little like personality type family. So
that's so funny because when people ask me that, I always just say INFJ, but I'm an ambivert technically because with the INFJ, I'm 51% INFJ and then 49% ENFJ, the extroverted version.
Same. I've taken it twice. Like I've taken it so many times. So depending on my mood, it will give me like one way or the other.
Me too. That is so bizarre. See, guys, can you hear this? Like, this is the sort of stuff that happens. And I think too, like when you go to interview someone, be selective about who you interview. Don't just kind of get an inquiry and be like, yep, like, at this very start, feel free to, but over time you'll start to learn, I really just want to have people that are going to offer value, that are going to show up in the best capacity, that you get along with, and then your audience gets more out of it. Because I've had podcast episodes before where it's like I've brought a stranger on, never really got to know them, never really got to vibe with them first, and then they've come on and it's been okay, but it hasn't been like a super awesome podcast interview, and then they've dropped off the face of the planet later. And I'm very connection driven, so like when I know people and like them, I kind of want them to be around in my reality somewhere. I don't want to just have them on for a podcast episode and then disappear for the rest of my days. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, that works for me. It's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone. Like if you're a dietitian and you want to bring on nutritionists and fitness people and you just want to provide shitloads of value and not have those relationships, that's cool. Go ahead, go for it. I just know that for me personally, when I've been on podcast episodes before, like it's great doing a podcast episode for a stranger, but then it's like that episode somewhere out in the cyber wilderness and you never hear from that. You don't keep in touch with that person and you just kind of think, oh, it's a bit disappointing. So I think knowing what your expectations are as well when you start your podcast, like do you want to do solo? Do you want to do interviews? How do you want the style of relationships to be before and after? Like I know for me now, I don't interview strangers anymore. I just prefer to interview people that I know, like, and trust once again.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So tell the people where they can find you, all of the things. Feel free to promo any like thing that you have going on. Tell them where they can find you on the interwebs. I'll also put it in the show notes, but I know like I never look at the show notes. So I like to like
Neither
hear
do I.
things.
I like skim them. I skim. I'm like, does that look like something I'd be interested in? Yeah or no? Like I pretty much know. And like I even said to my podcast manager, I was like, when you do the show notes, just have dot points. All that text and like a little narrative or a blog post is like so not something that I would read. So just have it super simple. Just dot points. What is this about? Boom, upload. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. It's funny that you're like that too. Anyway, so people, where can you find me? So my podcast I should probably start with is called Slaying Your Side Hustle. And it's all about, female entrepreneurialism and podcasting and all this, that, and the other. On Instagram, I'm Olivia Powell Coaching. And on Facebook, it's Slaying Your Side Hustle Online. And they're just my main platforms. I'm on YouTube too, but not much. So you can find me there.
All right. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been really fun. If anyone has questions for Olivia, she's super nice. So definitely reach out to her on Instagram or wherever. And I will talk to you guys on the next episode.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for tuning in and for spending this beautiful time together on the Slaying Your Side Hustle podcast. I am so glad that you stopped by, and if you want to stop by again, then hit the subscribe button for future episodes. For more beyond this podcast, you can email me at oliviapowellcoaching@gmail.com, or you can even send me a Facebook DM telling me what you thought and what you'd like to hear more of. Feel free to hang out with me on Instagram, tag me, or share my stuff on your stories, whatever you like. If you could just take 1 second to share this episode with someone who would love it, then that would truly be amazing, and this would continue to contribute to the greater good by spreading the love to thousands and thousands of like-minded entrepreneurial and business women around the globe. Isn't that a cool thought? I think so too. See you in the next episode.